wherein we have come here, assembled here in the online portal to understand the birds that are around us. I would request all of you to switch off your video and mute your microphone unless you want to ask a question. And if you have any questions while I'm explaining, you can always type it in the comment section or under the chat box, and they will all be answered at the end. So let us start with today's presentation. First, we need to understand what are birds. Unlike us human beings, birds have a few things which are very unique to them in the entire animal kingdom, which they do not share the features with any other organism in the animal kingdom. There are three main features like that. The first feature is that the feathers, which is unique only to the birds and nobody else in the entire animal kingdom. The second one is that their beak, again, is a modified jaw, which do not have a teeth and is made up of keratin, a protein that is similar to our nails and hair. Okay, this is the second thing that is very unique only to the birds. And the other thing is they are the only creatures which lay hard-shelled eggs. You might wonder, there are so many different organisms that lay eggs, but if you say insects, they have a different type of eggshell, and the reptiles have a different type of eggshells, and the birds are the only ones which have hard-shelled eggs, including the mammal, the only mammal that lays egg. It is a different type of shell that it has. So let us understand where these birds came from. We all know that they have evolved from the dinosaurs, but why, when we think of it, we need to understand the evolution or the correlation between the prey and the predator. Over hundreds of years, the prey have been evolving to escape the predators, and so have the predators in order to hunt their prey. So that is how the small dinosaurs, or the dinosaurs, basically the theropods, who have evolved to be the survivors of today in the form of birds. Now, when we say dinosaurs, the first one that gave us the concrete proof that they have evolved from, the birds have evolved from the dinosaurs, is this particular one, which is called the Archaeopteryx lithographica. The image on the right side, what you see on your screen, is the actual fossil that was derived in the 1800s, which gave us the proof that they have evolved, the birds have evolved from dinosaurs. And on the left side is the graphical representation of the same. Now, when we think of dinosaurs, we assume it to be really big because of the movies and other articles that we have read about. However, those big dinosaurs were not able to evolve quickly in order to adapt to the changing conditions around them. So it was only the small dinosaurs which were able to make changes to their body and survive even today in the form of birds. And these dinosaurs were slightly larger than today's crow only. So once they have evolved, they have kept on diversifying. And today we can see about 9,702 different species of birds. There are 10,300 documented so far. However, some are extinct and some are in dispute. What I mean by saying in dispute is that those birds would have been declared extinct, but somebody claims that they have seen those birds, but they do not have a proof to show that they have seen the bird, like a photograph proof or a video or something like that, which is not available. So they are considered as species in dispute. So excluding the ones that are extinct and the ones in dispute, we have about 9,702 different species that are found across the globe. In India, there are about 1,500 different species recorded so far. Now, when we think why they have diversified so much, we need to look at our world map. When we go to different places across this map, we understand the geographical conditions are quite different in each place. So when these birds developed wings, they started being highly locomotive. And when they approached different habitats and found food there, they started living there and making adaptations in order to survive well in that particular habitat. So that is why they had to diversify a lot. Even today, we can see records of so many different species that are having subspecies under them. And over the years, if you see the last 10 years data, many subspecies which were recorded have become a main species. Now let us look at the different habitats that they are offered as of now in the world. The first one is the wooded forest. Now under wooded forest, we can see the evergreen, semi-evergreen, dry deciduous and moist deciduous forests, and also the all these alpine forests. These are all wooded forests. Okay, and the next type of habitat that we can see are the grasslands. Grasslands are very important. There are so many different birds that are very well adapted to the grasslands, and they cannot survive in any other places, okay, in any other habitats. So it is important that we consider grassland as a habitat and not an opportunity to do something there, like even a tree plantation there would destroy this particular habitat and the birds that live in this habitat. The next habitat type that we will see is the rocky outcrops. Now we have seen a lot of rocky outcrops around Bangalore city, or maybe there were some inside the city also which are not there right now. But if you go to the outskirts, you will see plenty of rocky outcrops. So these are also extremely good habitats for a lot of varieties of birds. And then one of the most productive habitats on the planet is again the wetlands. That is a very productive habitat on the terrestrial, or that's inland habitats. Okay, so here there's abundance of vegetation and aquatic life, due to which there are a lot of other forms of life also that are dependent on these particular habitats. And birds which play different roles as a consumer makes this an ideal habitat for the birds to be present. The next one are the high altitude mountains. Now there are a lot of birds that are very well adapted to live in these conditions where the oxygen level is very low, the air is very thin, but still they have managed to successfully fly in these areas where even our helicopters and other aeroplanes find it difficult to maneuver. The next habitat is the deserts. That is, we have two types of desert, that is the cold desert and the hot desert, and birds can be found in both of them. In cold deserts, you would have seen a lot of birds like penguins, and in hot deserts, you would see a lot of birds of prey. And finally, we have the oceans and seas. Our birds are not restricted only to the terrestrial habitats, but also there are pelagic birds which live 24/7, 365 days in the mid oceans. Okay, they even sleep in the waters and only come to the land when they have to breed, only to lay their eggs. Otherwise, they are always in the mid waters. Now, I'm sure a lot of you here today would be in the hobby of bird watching, or would have observed birds and their lovely behaviors, or their colors, their feather patterns, and so on. But sometimes it can get frustrating when you see all these wonderful things and you're not able to identify it. You don't know how to search for more information because you do not know the name of the bird. So I will help you on certain key features, what you need to do. The first thing is you must become familiar with their general shape, color, and behavior of birds. Okay, you have to segregate them as very small or medium sized. And how you can do this is by comparing them, the bird that you see, with the bird that you already know. For example, if I see a very small bird, I would compare it with a sparrow. I would say if it's similar in size with sparrow, or slightly larger or smaller than sparrow. The next size that I would talk about is myna. Myna is a common bird and everyone knows about it. So we can easily cross-reference with this bird for the bird that we have seen. And the next size would be of that of a crow. Crow is again a common bird around here, and we can easily cross-reference it with crow. And the last size, that is the really big birds that we see, we can match it with the eagles or the kites. Okay. And the next thing is you need to understand the habitats each of these species live in. You cannot search for a seabird in a forest. So that basic understanding we need to have. And then at what time of the year they would visit your location. There are so many birds that migrate, and there are so many birds that are resident. So resident birds you will be able to see throughout the year. However, the migratory birds, you will be able to see them seasonally. So you need to understand which months they are likely to visit your location. Only then you will be able to spot them. So you basically need to have a very keen observation in order to identify the birds. I'll help you with some more features of how to remember their names very easily. This is a small illustration done by one of my friend, Shraddha, and I have just marked the names of it, which is also used in one of the books that we released recently. So here you can see different parts, the external parts are named. Why I'm showing you this slide is because most of the birds have been given names based on their physical characteristics. Okay, for example, one of the common birds that we can see is a red whiskered bulbul. Now it has the red color in the whisker area. That is why it's called red whiskered and belongs to bulbul family. Now, whenever you see a bird and identify it or refer it to a book, always try to remember the name with the key features that is there in the name. That way you will be able to easily relate to the bird when you see it next time, and you don't need a guide to understand what species it is. You will be able to easily identify the name. Next, if we look at some interesting things about birds, they also have a four-chambered heart just like us, and they have highly developed visual system. This is something that we have been discussing right from our school days. We would have heard this particular thing. Everyone says that birds have really good eyesight and they have very good vision and things like that. Why we say visual system is because there are few things that we need to understand. I have heard a lot of people say that they can zoom into things like how a camera does, but that is not true. They cannot actually do that because it's just an eye and not a camera which can adjust its lens distance. Okay, but what we mean by highly developed visual system is that they can see infrared, they can see ultraviolet, okay, and they can see a lot more colors than a human eye can see. So that's why we say they have highly developed visual system. And the next thing about their vision is when they're flying at very high speeds, you would have noticed that when we travel in vehicles in very high speed, our eye tends to water a lot, right? Because the eye is getting dry and the glands start producing the water to lubricate it. Now the birds, how they tackle the problem is they have a membrane called nictitating membrane, as you can see in the slide here. That's a third eyelid that the bird has, which goes sideways. Now this particular membrane allows the bird to see even when it is flying or when the bird dives into the water. It's like an inbuilt goggles that human beings wear when doing skydiving or diving underwater. All right, so next we will look at some of the interesting features of their adaptations, that is beak, foot, and wing adaptations. Firstly, we'll look at the beak. Now, these are some of the pictorial guides to the beak shapes that we have in birds. However, this is not all the different varieties. There are so many other varieties also, but this is just for your understanding. Now here, what we need to understand from the beaks is that by looking at a bird's beak, we will be able to understand what they eat. Now, for example, a generalist beak will eat a variety of things. They can even scavenge, they can hunt, or they can even eat grains. But there are others who have specialized beak. If you look at the insect catching, it's very short and pointed, which helps it to catch the insects which are hiding in between the leaves or under the leaves. The surface skimming one, if you see, the lower beak is longer than the upper beak, upper mandible. Okay, this is mainly because this particular bird, or the birds that belong to the skimmers family, they like to eat fish but do not like to get their body wet. So what they do, they fly over the surface of the water with only their lower mandible inserted. That way, any fish that is there in the surface of the water will slide directly into its mouth. So like this, When we look at the different birds that are around us, we will be able to understand what they are feeding on or why they are visiting your neighborhood. So that's very important documentation that you need to do. The next one that you can see are the feet adaptations. Now here, by looking at the feet adaptations, we will be able to understand which part of the forest or a terrestrial habitat or an aquatic habitat the bird lives in. For example, the first one on the left side, which says walking on mud heron, the digits are extremely long when compared to the others. This helps them to walk on the wet sand or quicksand, which is there around the water bodies, or even on the vegetation that grows in the water bodies, by balancing their weight and by helping them stay on top of it and not sinking. Okay. Similarly, if you look at the eagle's feet, it's more bulkier. It is designed to pierce the talons or the nails. It is designed to pierce through the skin and the flesh, and the bulkier digits help it to carry heavy weight. That is why you see eagles carrying their prey. Similarly, when we look at all the other feet adaptations also, we will be able to understand what their uses are and where they live. Okay. Now, when you look at birds around you, you might not be able to see the feet adaptation so easily unless you have a very good camera or the bird comes really close to you. It will be slightly difficult, but do keep an eye out. And if you are able to observe, that is a great thing to document. And among the adaptations, the final one is the wing adaptations. Like I said earlier, a lot of birds are residents and some are migratory. So if they are birds that need to travel long distances at a very great height, they need to have a very broad wingspan. And some of the birds, like I said, which spend a lot of time in the oceans and seas, they need to have a different type of wingspan to maneuver in the high-speed winds. So here are some of the general shapes that you can see. And why this is important is because not always you will get an opportunity to see the bird sitting on one place. So sometimes you might see them flying above you in a very great speed, where you cannot see the other characteristics very well, but you can see the wing shape and structure. By looking at this, you will be able to narrow it down to what family they belong to or what group of birds they belong to, and try to see which one matches the picture you have taken or what you have seen. That way you will be able to identify the bird. Next interesting feature is the behavior. I'm sure most of you would have enjoyed a bird which is building a nest or feeding somebody else or trying to eat something, and you would have tried to feed the birds. Okay, so this is one particular, there are different types of behaviors that we can see. So here we can see in the first image, red whisker bulbul is trying to feed its chicks. Okay, this is a very interesting thing to see how the chicks compete with each other to get the maximum amount of food. Every time the parents come close by, they start opening their mouth and asking for food. In spite of the parents having the food or not, they keep doing that, which pressurizes the parents to go again and get more food. Okay, then the other activity or the behavioral aspect that you might see is the nesting. There are so many different types of birds that build nests in a different manner. Some nest on the ground, some in tree cavities, and some build nests using grass and twigs. So these are some very interesting features. So if you have any birds around you which are building some nest, do keep a distance and observe them and document them if possible. Then you might also see some birds are singing or calling. Now, when it comes to calls or songs, birds have different types of songs. Okay, first one is they have a communication call, wherein some of the birds live in pairs or in a group. So they need to constantly communicate with each other to know where they are and if there are any predators. So they communicate with each other. Then if they see any predators, they make a different type of call. This is called the warning call, to alert the others about the predators nearby. And the other one is the song. Now, song, there can be different types of songs for different birds. Some of the birds even copy the sounds of other birds and other sounds that they hear around them. So you cannot say that one particular bird is going to sing only one type of song. There are birds that do that, but there are so many other birds which have a variety of different songs depending on when they are singing and why they are singing. Usually it is for attracting their mates. The next thing is sexual dimorphism. Not all birds look alike. Okay, some of the birds in the same species look very identical with very minute changes or no changes at all. Like the one seen on the left, Ashiprinia, they look very similar. The males might have slightly more yellowish underparts when compared to the female, but it's very difficult to tell in the field when you actually observe them. However, there are so many different species which look totally unique. I mean, they look very different from the female or the male. As you can see, the Asian quail here, the males are completely black. The female looks like a completely different species, which is brown and white. But they both belong to the same species. They are male and female. So this also you need to keep in mind when you are looking at birds, because I have seen so many of us generally when they send us pictures to identify birds, we see them identifying the quail male, but the female, they do not know which bird it is, and they send the picture and ask what species it is. So it's important to know what gender, I mean, according to gender also, how they look. Next, we will look at the migration of birds. Whenever we hear the term migration, always it's the birds that come into our mind for the right reasons. They are known for doing some of the greatest migrations on the planet, that is from North Pole to South Pole and back. There are so many birds that do that. We will look at that one by one. But in general, when we talk about migration, there are 4 different types. Let us look at them one by one. You would have seen birds flying in this particular arrangement usually. During the early morning hours or in the evening hours, it's very likely that you will see the birds like this. The birds that travel long distances tend to do this type of migration. This is called the V-shaped migration. Basically, what happens is, this is a very effective teamwork that happens. The bird that is in the front, most of the times we tend to think they are the leaders who are leading the way, but it is not the case. That one is the one which is doing the hard work of flapping the wings. Okay, and the other ones are making use of that lift and just placing their wings in the right position to get that lift. Okay, so when the bird in the front gets tired, it moves back, and the bird behind it will come forward and take that role. So by doing this, less energy is spent, they get rest in between, and they can travel long distances without taking any breaks. So this is something that I think we as human beings need to learn of efficiency. The next thing is murmuration. A lot of birds, before migrating, they assemble in a particular point in thousands of numbers, and then they start their migration to make sure they are safe from predators and any other dangers that may exist. So now looking at the different types of migration, one is the long distance migration. And I have 2 examples here. The first one is the Arctic tern, which, like I said earlier, travels from the North Pole to South Pole and back every year, holding the record for the longest migration of all the birds. And the next one, for the longest non-stop flight, the record is held by the bar-tailed godwit, which is known to fly for 9 days without making any stops. Okay, there was one which was ringed, and it was recorded at flying for 11,680 kilometers in 9 days without making a single stop. So you can imagine how much of distance they have traveled and how efficiently they have traveled without having to break for food or water. The next type of migration is diurnal migration, wherein a lot of birds, they don't do the traveling at one shot. They take breaks in between. That is, they travel during the day, and in the night, they halt at some safe place. Okay, this is one example where the swallows, which migrate during daylight, they don't fly very high as well. They fly at the height of canopies or a little higher than that. And they're known to travel approximately around 300 kilometers per day. And they travel in flocks, just like how we saw in the murmuration. They gather in great numbers and then they start their journey. The next type of migration is the nocturnal migration. Now, these are some birds that visit India. These birds fly only during the night to travel, and during the daytime, they rest and feed and stay at the same place. So these are some of the flycatchers and warblers that you can see every winters that come to the South India. And we will be able to identify these birds in the coming months. The next type of migration is the short distance or the altitudinal migration. Now, these birds do not travel from different countries. Any bird that migrates within a country will be considered as short distance migration. And if if it is an altitudinal migration, the best example I could give is the Himalayas, wherein the birds which live at the top during the winters, because it snows a lot, there's no food available. Okay, so during that time, as the winter season begins, they come down to the plains and feed there. And once the summer begins, they again start their journey back to the top of the mountains. Now, why we need to understand birds? Now, yes, we all observe birds and enjoy their beauty and their colors, their behaviors, and their songs. But why is it important to document birds and understand them even more in detail? Is because, first thing, they're placed at different levels of the trophic web. Okay, some of the birds can be consumers where they eat only plant material like the grains or fruits and things like that. And there are birds which feed on insects and small other creatures, invertebrates mainly. Then there are birds that feed on reptiles and other small birds. Then there are really huge birds which hunt for mammals and other birds. And then there are other scavenger-like birds which feed on dead carcasses. This places them across the food web. Okay, so if any disruption is there, we will be able to understand by actually observing the birds. Disruption as in if there is any disruption in a habitat, like human induced or natural, we will be able to understand that. Next is biological control. Now, if you see a garden, there will be a lot of plants which have torn leaves. That is mainly because there will be some insects that are feeding on the leaves or the fruits or the flowers. Now, these birds help in controlling the population of those insects, in turn returning the favor to the plants. And because they have higher metabolism rates, they keep excreting wherever they are, and they also produce manure. They become manure for the plants to do well. Okay, so they do biological control of insect population or any of their prey. Then the next thing is they are active pollinators and seed dispersers. Like I said, some of the beaks are modified in a very specific way to collect nectar from flowers. So when they are collecting nectar from flowers, they in turn pollinate the flowers. And then a lot of birds are frugivores. They eat the fruits and excrete the inner seeds. Meanwhile, they would have traveled long distances, so the seeds would go somewhere else and start germinating from that particular region. They always say birds are the best farmers of the forest because they eat a wide variety of fruits and spreading the seeds across different places far from the mother tree or the plant. Okay, that way a healthy population of mixed vegetation is maintained. That gives rise to healthy forest ecosystem. And then several of these birds are keystone species, wherein a lot of other species are dependent on birds. One such example I can give is the sandalwood tree, which is a state tree of Karnataka. This tree cannot exist if there are no birds that eat their fruits. Okay, mainly because the fruits or the seeds which are there in the sandalwood fruits have a special coating which have to be processed through the digestive juices of the birds. Only then, when they are excreted, they are capable of germinating. So if this does not happen, researchers have worked on various chemical processes to undergo the same process. However, the success rate is very low. So without any support or anything like that, naturally, these birds are doing that job for several plant species. So that is why they are considered as keystone species. Then bioindicators. Now, bioindicators are something that indicate the healthy or the health of an ecosystem. Okay, so birds are studied as bioindicators across the globe because they are placed at various levels of the food web. And like I said earlier, if any disruption is there, we will be able to identify them. So they are the indicators that we use to study an ecosystem. Now we look at some of the critically endangered, threatened, and endangered species of our country or of our state. I'm not taking the entire list, just a few. First one is the black-bellied tern. This is a bird which is extremely rare. This was sighted in the year 2012 in the Ghataprabha river, that is a tributary of Krishna, in Belagavi. Excuse me. So the next one is a steppe eagle. Now this one is more like a nomadic eagle which keeps migrating throughout the year. They keep traveling to different parts of their geographical range. So this one is also in the endangered status, wherein their numbers have significantly reduced in the last 10 to 15 years due to loss of habitat and hunting. Then another species which is very well studied is the Indian vulture or the long-billed vulture, which specifically a lot of you would have noticed this particular species, which was dying due to the pesticides or the particular medicine or vaccination given to cattle. And when they fed on the cattle, their populations were dying. And now there is a reserve forest created or the sanctuary created for them in Ramnagara in Karnataka. The next one is the Great Indian Bustard, which was supposed to be the national bird of our country. But because of its name, the status went to the Indian peafowl or the peacock, and it was not this one. Now, their numbers are extremely low, mainly because, remember when I told you about the grasslands, I had specifically mentioned that some of the birds are very well suited for grassland habitats. And when we, in the name of conservation, without proper awareness, when we plant trees in a grassland, we are destroying that habitat. And this bird is a typical example of being a victim for that particular cause. Because a lot of grasslands, when we saw people have planted trees in the name of conservation, and these birds lost their habitat and they were hunted, or their eggs could not hatch because of predation by other animals. Okay, so their numbers are extremely low and they are in the critically endangered status. And the last species for today that we are going to see is the red-headed vulture, which is one of my favorite because of the 5 species that I have shown you today. This species, I encountered it last year in Kodagu district of Karnataka. That was my first sighting, red-headed vulture, which is extremely rare and critically endangered species. Okay, so if you see any of these species, you are extremely lucky because we don't know how long it's going to take for their numbers to come up with proper conservation measures, or if habitat loss and degradation continue the same way, we might never see them also. Now, just to give you a good to know information, I have collated the bird sanctuaries of Karnataka. If you ever want to visit these sanctuaries to observe birds, these are very good places that you can do. The biggest among this is the Rangantittu Bird Sanctuary, which is very close by to Bangalore. But other than that, you can see the list of bird sanctuaries here. You can visit all of these to observe birds. Now, other than that, in Bangalore city or in any other, wherever you are, you can see a lot of birds around a water body. Like I said, a wetland is a very productive ecosystem. So you can see plenty of bird life in that particular region. So if you want to start off, that would be the ideal place to start. If you go to any parks or forest areas, it's very difficult to see the birds because the canopy or the bushes will be so dense that the birds will be in between them and the visibility of them will be very low. You will have to rely on their calls to identify them. So that is why I would say a grassland or a wetland is the best habitat where you can start doing the birding, because there will be a lot of open areas and the birds will come to drink the water, or if they are hunting something from the water, you will be able to see them easily and start observing them. Other than that, yes, please.
Yeah, so like you said, the red-headed vulture, they're very rare and critically endangered. What is the reason to their numbers declining?
The main reason would be the lack of habitat. See, their habitats are shrinking every day. The forests are being changed into cultivation lands or any other purposes for human habitation. So that their habitats are shrinking on daily basis, and also some areas they are getting fragmented. And these birds are scavengers. They need to find dead meat frequently in order to survive. So if they are not able to find enough prey species that are out in the open for them to feed on, that becomes a challenge for them to find food, and they will have to travel long distances. And when they do this, they get isolated from populations. And sometimes some birds live a solitary life where they don't find another of the same species also. And these birds don't produce many chicks like the smaller birds that we see. And the survival rate of the chicks are also comparatively lower. I hope I have answered your question. We'll take more questions after some time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
For the
Yeah, and now what do I do if I see a bird's nest? This is a question that I get frequently in my WhatsApp or Facebook or Instagram, wherein a lot of people send pictures of the nests and say they have seen a nest very close by to their house, and they don't know what to do about it. The best thing to do is do not go very close to it. If you have seen it very well, stay away from it and observe from a distance. The reason why I say stay away is I know you're not intending any harm to the nest, but when the parents see you near the nest, they think of you as a predator. So when they see a predator can approach the nest so close, they think that it's not worth raising the chicks or incubating the eggs and continuing the work, because anytime the predators might come and eat the eggs or the chicks. So they tend to abandon the nest. So it's very important that when you see a nest, leave it alone and come as far as possible, and see to it that no other people are also going very close to it. And I know it can be a very curious thing to photograph young chicks which are newly hatched, but please try to do so from a distance. Do not go very close, because many times when people approach the nest for photographing, the chicks tend to get scared and jump out of the nest. And after that, they end up dying or in a rehabilitation center. So that is not a very nice thing for the young one to undergo. So keep the stress level low, you stay away from it, and even if you have to photograph, get an angle from a distance and not very close to the nest. So by saying this, I hope you will all start observing the birds in a very good manner from your balconies, your windows, your terrace, or if you're able to go to a garden, or if you have a garden at your home, do observe and document it, and do send it to us whenever you can. I thank you all, and now we'll start taking the questions for today. Okay, I have a question here from Sridhar Narayanan. He's asking, if the bird's bones are hollow, how do they heal when broken? That's a very interesting question. Recently, I had another question similar to this. When a bird's bones are hollow, where does the blood come from? So when you actually look at it, not all the bird's body is hollow. It's only the bones that help in the flight. They are hollow, and the rest of the bones are like a natural bone of any other organism, which has a marrow inside, which produces blood and other tissues. Next, I have a question from Pavan MK. Can you please explain about roosting behavior in birds? Okay, there are different behaviors that we can see according to the species. Some of the birds tend to roost alone. Okay, usually somewhere in a very thick bush where they cannot be easily spotted. Then there are a lot of other birds which like to roost with their own species. So a lot of birds you can see, they all gather in the evening, they keep communicating with each other, and then they go silent as as it becomes dark. Okay, then there are other birds which has a mixed species roosting. Usually around water bodies, you can see such kind of roosting behavior. Where you can see a lot of egrets, herons, pelicans, all these roost together. So this gives them safety in numbers and also many eyes that are looking for predators. I hope I have answered your query. Next, I have a question from Asha Priya. What are the diseases which affect the birds and what are the parasites which causes such diseases and what are the reasons? Now, this is a very interesting question, Asha, but it's a very long topic to discuss upon because the diseases in wildlife are a very big topic to discuss on. What I would generally say is usually in birds, they are quite healthy, but when they get infected from various parasites, it could be parasites from different sources, from their food, from their habitat, or from their nesting. It could be anything. Okay, such parasites, when they enter their body, certain times there is no effect on them, but at times they can create a very bad effect, and it can spread like anything to all the other birds that they come across, just like the COVID-19 virus that we are undergoing. Okay, and next I have a question from Shalini H. During yearly migration, how can they exactly locate the place? Okay, a lot of birds follow their food. Like, for example, a lot of birds that stay in the northern hemisphere, as winter approaches, they don't find food in their particular habitat and they'll have to start moving south. Okay, this way they follow the food and they reach a different place. And when it starts to be summer here, they again follow their food back to their original place. This is one way. And the other birds that migrate long distances, they are able to navigate using the position of stars and other earthly or heavenly bodies. Okay, and also they can understand the magnetic field of the earth, because of which they can navigate easily. Then I have the next question here. What are the basic parameters of habitat mapping through RS and GIS?
The land use is the one of the things that so then only the land use of the species occurring that gives what are the kinds of habitat they require. Landscape elements have to be mapped.
Okay, first what you need to do is map the landscape elements, that is the different type of topography and the things that are present there, the vegetation and the human habitation or any other thing that is present there. And then you will have to document the birds and mark the bird species according to the location and overlay both together in order to map them. Then I have another question here from Karthik Salehittal. He's asking if there is any disputed species in Karnataka. No, as of now, there are no disputed species in Karnataka. And if there are any other questions, you can ask me now. Okay, Dr. Draupadi Yadav is asking a question. Is there any bird identification digital library for Indian birds? We have a portal called Indian Biodiversity Portal, which is also a digital library where you also can contribute towards it. Whenever you identify a bird, you can post the picture and the location into that portal. Similarly, there are many others also which you can refer. There are two other databases also which do similar work globally. One is AVBase and the other one is eBird. Then we have the next question here. What are the methods to follow to conservation of birds? like great vulture, Indian bustards, and other threatened birds, breeding centers are there in India. Okay, Pavan MK is asking this question. Well, there are certain breeding programs that are going on for a few of the species, like the one in Ramanagara, which they have a breeding program for vultures. And for Indian bustards, there is a program in Rajasthan or Gujarat. I don't recollect properly, but there is one program that is going on for their conservation. Now, when you talk about conservation in general, you cannot apply the same methodology to every species. We'll have to identify which species we are choosing to conserve and what is their habitat, and see what are their threats. And based on that, we'll have to develop a conservation plan. Okay, and then we have another question from Ayman Prince. Some birds tend to protect themselves by camouflage, like the nightjars. Some of the nightjars live on the ground, but as a human visiting that habitat, how will one know of such species? Well, this is a very interesting question, Ayman. You need to be extremely observant of what you're looking for and where you need to look. Because like you said, the nightjars are extremely camouflaged and they rest in the sides where there are a lot of leaf litter. So their feather patterns are also matching to that leaf litter. So it becomes very difficult for you to identify. But the best I would recommend is in the evening times when it's just getting dark, these birds start to become active and they move around to catch the insects. So that would be the best time you can actually spot them and photograph them. Okay, next we have another question from Asha Priya. She's asking if is there any gland which enables them to go to the destination while migrating? No, a gland does not help them to migrate, but in aquatic birds that swim, there is a gland which produces oil, which they apply it on the feathers, which helps them to float in water, but not for migration. Okay, I'm just going through the next question here. Sagar NS has a question. The birds lay eggs and the birds fly in search of food. Do they forget the place where they laid the egg? No, Sagar, they do not forget the place. You cannot forget your own home. So before building the nest, they would have done a lot of research of that particular area, because they need to make sure that the nest doesn't fall off and there are no predators. It's away from human beings, and even after the eggs hatch, they have enough space for the chicks to move around also a little bit. Okay, so they do not forget their nest. Then there is a question from Meenakshi Palaniyappan. Does water chemistry affect aquatic birds of wetlands? Water chemistry will definitely affect the bird life, mainly because there will be a change in aquatic life based on water chemistry. And the birds that are dependent on these biological organisms which are there in water, their patterns also change. See, for example, if there is a water body with no fishes in it, there is no point for any bird that eat fish to be there. So that way they do move away to places where they can find food and shelter. Okay, so that concludes the questions that are posted here. Okay, there is one that just came in from Shreyas Bala. What are the adapted changes between a bird in the Arctic versus a bird in the equatorial region? There are a lot of changes if you're asking about their body features. The birds that tend to live in the Arctic region have a thicker skin, and their feathers are modified in a different way, where they are closely aligned to make sure that no air enters inside and their body temperature is retained. However, in the equatorial region, that is not the case. The feathers are similar to what we see around us here. So that's a main difference, and their food habits are also different, wherein the equatorial birds will be having a higher metabolism rate and will consume food more frequently. But the Arctic birds consume food that are rich in fats. So that is all the questions that I have to, here, which is typed. So if there are any questions, you can always get back to us. I hand over the session to Deepthi. Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you, Riju, for a very enlightening presentation on Know Your Bird. I hope all the participants have benefited from the valuable information Rijulal gave on the birds. So this entire session will be archived on YouTube, and if